English, thank you very much.
Of the European Union are meeting this week to talk about Brexit. Theresa May is going to Brussels today to meet the President of the Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. The two big questions dominating all this: are we facing the prospect of leaving the EU without a deal? And if we are, does it really matter? Well, John Redwood, it's a leading Brexiteer, former government minister, of course. Mr. Redwood, I assume your answer is no, it doesn't really matter.
Good morning. Well, yes, before the referendum and after, I've always said prepare for no deal. We can do just fine with that, but I suspect at the 11th hour the EU will want a free trade deal with us because they won't want tariffs on all their exports to us. But if we look as if we're weak, it's going to delay getting any sensible offer out of them.
So what's the point of Theresa May going to meet Mr. Juncker today, do you think? Maybe you think there's no point?
Well, I think it's always good to talk. Prime Minister has offered a very positive and full, friendly future partnership, which would be better than no deal. And she's trying to pursue that. At some point, the rest of the EU might decide they want to talk about that. Whether they're ready this week or not, we will find out soon.
So there is something out there that is, for you, better than no deal? Because I sort of thought that perhaps some people like you thought, let's just leave and be the hell with it.
Well, I would like to leave at the end of March 2019, as Parliament voted to do very conclusively when we sent the letter. And I remember explaining to Parliament that sending the letter was the decision. That was the decision to leave, and it's now an irreversible process according to the treaty. And so, of course, you need to prepare for no agreements. But, of course, I think that if we had tariff-free trade with no new barriers, that would be better than if the EU insist on putting some tariffs and barriers in the way. The reason I'm fairly relaxed about them doing that is there are limits to how much damage they can do, because we're both members of the World Trade Organization, and we know we can trade perfectly successfully on world trade terms, because that's what we do at the moment with the whole of the rest of the world.
People like Ken Clarke say you people talk as if the WTO rules are a sort of land of milk and honey, and they're not.
Well, they work perfectly fine. Our trade with the rest of the world has been growing much more quickly than our trade with the EU under those self-same rules, and we have a surplus with the rest of the world, whereas, of course, we have a massive deficit with the EU. So I think we need to remember we're mainly the customer, not the supplier, and usually the customer gets a good deal. We'll have to see whether the EU get round to that. In the meantime, I and many people like me who voted to leave do want out with no further controls from the European Court and no further payments to the EU as soon as possible.
What about the future of the withdrawal bill?
Well, I think that will be fine. I'm sure that...
Fine meaning what in your terms?
Well, it will go through. It has to, because we need to transfer all that law so that when we do leave, as we will under the treaty and the letter we've already sent at the end of March 2019, there is a legal framework in place. I can't believe that Labour will be so irresponsible.
Well, not just Labour, some of your colleagues as well.
Wait a minute, hear me out. I mean, I don't think they can... Labour have always said that they accept the will of the British people with the referendum, and they've always said they like a lot of that European law, and we're asking them just to make sure it continues to apply. But I don't believe there are lots of Conservative MPs who will want to work with Labour if Labour have decided to use this bill as a way of trying to destroy Mrs May and bring the government down, because it's not in the Conservative interest, and I think not in the national interest, that Labour precipitate a general election and have another go at trying to get into office.
But it does appear that Labour's playing a fairly canny game, and they're kind of holding back, letting your lot make the running.
Well, I think Labour are deeply divided over all this, and the leadership of Labour used to be Eurosceptic. They've obviously been driven by their more EU positive people into playing that all down. I think they've now come to see that there could be tactical advantages as they see it in playing politics with this very important constitutional change. And if that's what they're going to do, I trust that practically every Conservative MP will agree with me that it's in the national interest that we fulfil the remit and the wishes of the British people, pass that legislation, and therefore have an orderly exit from the EU in March 2019, even without a deal.
John Redwood, many thanks.